How about Sorcerer here? So, this is a pretty poorly rated game. SPI games often are, actually. But in this case, I'm someone who rated it fairly poorly as well. I think I gave it about I think I gave it a 5. I know I gave it a 5. And what I can say about it is that it's not because of the game itself. From some abstract kind of objective view, I can't really tell you how good a game it is. What I can tell you is I don't see anything wrong with it as a game. What I see wrong with it is that it goes beyond my mental capacity to keep all the balls in the air, to juggle what I'm doing and how well I can do it. I think there's a puzzle behind it. It feels like every action has kind of a reaction that can kind of cancel it out. At least in the scenario that I played 2-player, as opposed to the solo scenarios, it felt very much as though neither side was terribly, hamstrung in comparison to the others. I'm not willing to play more scenarios, though, because this thing just hurts my brain. And it kind of makes me ill. It kind of makes me ill, in part, because I consider this game one of the greatest failures in graphic design. And you know what's amazing is that this is a Simonson design from start to finish, and he did the artwork as well. And this is just hideous to me. Now, of course, later games. This is from 75, I think. So you go about 10 years later to 85 in the late 80s. TSR, West End, the gamers even, were putting out these garish maps that don't look too different from this, but at least you could kind of filter that out and try to understand that it's actual terrain and that there's things being represented there, and imagine that and overlay your imagined reality onto the map itself. In this case, the colors are the game, and that's very, very almost nauseating. I also had problems with the counters. I of course, like the matte finish and the normal SPI counters, but the infantry, the human infantry, especially, say, the difference between yellow and green, they're these kind of darker shaded pieces. I found it very difficult to differentiate between them when I was playing and got kind of confused, because players will each probably be aligned with 2 or 3 colors. So it's very painful to distinguish those, at least for my brain again. It's kind of funny how badly rated this is, because I see very few people. There's a couple of people who will state, "Oh, I remember having a lot of fun with this." I think once you get over a hump, once you get over the puzzle of how you cope with certain things and how you think about things, kind of like High Frontier, to tell you the truth. The map for that is just so mind-boggling when you first struck with it, but eventually you start thinking in relation to it. In this, I start feeling some awareness of what the map kind of is representing, what the different color comparisons are, as you get kind of more used to playing at least a single scenario. But making all those connections and kind of burning them into your brain waves or patterns seems so not worth it for the story the game gives, which is, of course, what I'm most interested in. High Frontier gives me a very nice story. This, maybe if I get over that hump far enough, it would also give me a nice story, but I don't feel like I can make it there in little steps, right? I can make it there in little steps as to the strategy, but I've still got so many things to worry about in my head in terms of, that non-commutative aspect of the color strengths makes figuring out if you can attack something so difficult because you have to compare, and you could say this is true about certain war games as well, but you have to compare the terrain, the type of unit, and the relationship between the unit, the terrain, and the attacking and defending unit. All of that has to be combined. So each unit has different strength and different terrain. Each unit has different effective strength in terms of column shifts based on what kind of unit it's attacking. This is a layer of, combinations that some intuitive input would help. So, if I was playing and said, I've got gorillas in the jungle, that's going to be good, right? Or if it's a fantasy game, I got dwarves in the mountain, that's just going to be good, I know that. Well, here, I've got yellow in the orange, and I don't know if that's good. I know yellow in the yellow is going to be good, but I'm going to be shocked by some of these combinations. And that shock would be fine if it was kind of a hidden factor, like in the game Quirks, where the game is actually ruined if you start to realize all the combinations and what works where. It becomes deterministic. A player who knows the game well can judge whether or not they will beat a certain thing. Well, that's a game where the surprise factor is baked into the game, and if you no longer have that, it no longer works as well. Here, you have everything in front of you. You should be able to determine everything. Therefore, if you're like me, you must try. If you're a little smarter, a little bit more resilient towards pushing your way through it, you might make this, and you might find that this is really a very, very neat game underneath that puzzle once you reach that level of the puzzle. But here's the thing, why have that barrier in place when there are plenty of very good, more intuitive war games out there? And that's really where the problem is. I see some people objecting to the balance of it. My suspicion is that they weren't used to seeing too many asymmetrical games at the point that this came out, and maybe they didn't see that there was a strategy that balanced things out, that every opponent's strategy could actually be countered. Like I explained or mentioned in one of the videos, and it may have to be deleted because I'm having trouble with uTurd again. They're not processing things properly. Maybe I'll process it on my own machine and load it up straight up. I hate doing that though. But it's not just the non-commutative nature of the colors versus each other, but of the strategies within that you can take within those colors. It's as though there's different layers of Rochambeau within the game. Maybe 3 of them I think I identified. One of them is the colors versus the colors. One of them is which strategy you want to move towards to win. So like, you have small unit strategy versus bigger units versus using the mages to convert the colors versus color strikes versus this, that, and the other. And I think there was another one in there. Now, that last one may include 2 because it sounds so complex that there are, different layers within there, how to tactically cope with a particular situation versus the strategic end game that you want to get to, that you need to position yourself for. And that in all these cases, you're playing these different games of rock, paper, scissors, where one strategy will beat another, but it's out in the open, so you have, you get to see the other guy's choosing rock. Okay, I'll choose paper, but I gotta wait till his next turn. Now he's choosing scissors, and you can see where it's just not gonna go anywhere. But there are small little places where you can get a little bit of an edge. Maybe somebody overlooks something. Maybe they don't quite, have the movement points that they needed, whatever, where you can overcome them. There's also the luck factor that gets thrown in. The combat chart? God, the combat chart. The combat chart, this is a slice of it over here. We've got more color comparisons. Basically says, if I'm this color, I go on this row. and then our strength points are compared, and our strength points are modified by the color of the hex we're in to see what I do to you. And now, if I'm good against you, if I'm best against you, you're worst against... I got that wrong. If I'm worst against you, you're best against me, which means you'll be on the top row, being able to do more damage, and that can be a bigger swing than the strength points. But the strength points are modified by the colors of the hexes. The color bolts are modified also by where they're striking, but they're determined by where you fire from. Ouch. It's just this mass, this horrible Gordian knot you have to untangle on every single action that you're taking when it comes to the color comparisons and what you're trying to do. It's too much for me. And it's too much for me in part because I'm never feeling like I'm really getting the storyline from it. I'm always busy untangling that knot. I'm beginning to get to the point where I kind of feel like I'm untangling the knot, but I'm still not seeing any story for it. Because I don't think you can ever really do that. I think you're always going to be playing this as an optimization problem, which might be actually very appealing to some people. People who, for example, like very math-heavy Euros. This is real math here. There's math that's interesting here. This isn't just counting and comparing and trying to assess the board position numerically. This is closer to doing abstract algebra on a board. And I think that's really, really an intriguing concept in a sense. But it's not one that's fun for me. But I could see people who just really take to this, who have a certain kind of real mathematical mind. I have one that probably applies more to things like graph theory. So, more, not geometry. Geometry's never worked for me because geometry was all memorization from what I remember of it. But graph theory has sort of that spatial connections that I find very appealing. And if I could maybe see the graph that underlies the tangled web that I'm looking at here, I think I might be able to approach it that way. I'm intrigued by abstract algebras, but I've not worked with them enough to really feel comfortable in them, and I can't really translate abstract, you know, like you do the transmutations, I'm trying to think what they're called, where you basically turn one problem into another kind of problem. So you could turn an abstract algebra issue into a graph theory issue. I haven't done enough of that. I've done some kinds of algebras that way. It would be really interesting to approach this in that sort of fashion. But I think it would take a tremendous, tremendous amount of effort that I'm just not getting the right fun from. I'm just getting that puzzle from. But once I could get that visualization of the game, wow, I think I could do very well. And I'm assuming people who are visually oriented in this sort of way would be getting that. I'm also assuming that there are other people who can operate without that visual plane at all who can really enjoy this. For most people, though, for most humans, I think this game goes a little beyond what is pleasant to process at. And I do think that there's this Rochambeau aspect to it, that if you were playing at top game against somebody else at top game, you would end up constantly countering each other. And it would almost become a boring game, like a rock, paper, scissors, where you get to see what the other guy's going to do before, and then you have to announce what you're going to do to beat that, but also to beat his next game. Basically, you're in a situation where nobody could win. That's my suspicion of what this would turn into. The multiplayer obviously will not, though, because then you throw in the balance of power issue that any multiplayer game has. So you see someone starting to look like they're in a position ahead, and you knock them down, and this could become as interesting or uninteresting as many area control risk-type games or whatever. But again, there's a luck factor in here. Not just the combat table. I forgot to mention the other luck. The attrition roll. Or draw. I did rolls all through mine, but supposedly you draw 2 chits each time. You get 2 different colors, and that can totally screw with what somebody's plans are. That's actually something that makes the solitaire games interesting, even if you could figure out, you know, patterns that work in them, which, again, I'm not willing to put that effort in. I don't really like solitaire games. I don't like figuring out puzzles. But I think it would be quite possible to come up with patterns that dominate whatever style of play I was trying to do, that give you a great chance of, a fair chance of victory at least, especially in that Space Invaders type one. I'm not sure about the other one. That one looked nearly impossible to me. But anyway, that Space Invaders type one, I feel like you could build up a defensive pattern and get yourself to keeping 5 cities and 5 humans, and then seeing, okay, I can take it one more level, I can get another human to survive if I pull him out of a city early enough or whatever. And just kind of pushing that further and further as you begin to learn the patterns to it. I think that would be quite possible. And, you know, if you love solitaire puzzles, there you go. You've got two that are kind of intriguing in this. On top of this humongous puzzle of how to view the interrelationships of these dominances that happen in the game. So I think there's a lot of game here. This is the kind of game I think somebody could spend a couple of years studying. Going through all the scenarios. There aren't all that many. I think there's about a dozen. And learning different stages, you know, as you go through the solitaire, which becomes a simple puzzle, then you go through those 2-player ones where you eventually get to the point where a couple people are always tying. Then you open it up to people who understand the game already, to that multiplayer situation. And if you only had maybe a dozen games, this would be a fantastic choice, I think, to add to your stable, because, you know, it would serve you for a year or two to just work your way through being able to play it well. What do you get in the end? You get something that a guy over on the Game Box, which is my forum, and you should go visit it, tried to project, which was, could you make an abstract game that's just as complicated as a war game? And I think the thinking process, and I'm not sure about all the different all the different pieces of information in this, because, you know, there's only 6 colors, and there's a few other things in play, there's only a few different types of pieces. But I think the interactions in this are as complex as you get in, say, an OCS style game. Or in Go. I think Go has tremendously complex interactions, actually, that are beyond a human's capability. But here's the thing. Both of those, the OCS has a reality that it draws upon that helps inform your decisions. I need supply. I'll ship supply out there, right? I know that I need this vague amount, right? I need to have that stockpiled and then some excess because I may need reactions and this, that, and the other. I just need this. In Go, some patterns are good, right? This board doesn't lend itself to patterns, though. It's not repetitive, right? The patterns aren't going to work everywhere on the board. Now, Go has its special places, but here, and you could make new boards for this if you really love it. You could make randomized boards using little colored, you know, geomorphics and stuff. There's just so much you could do with this, expanding it even. It's really like a completely different world, and one that the mind just doesn't grasp. At least this mind doesn't grasp. And I think so much could be done with this in so many interesting ways. In the sense that you could take the standard, you know, Battle of the Bulge type system, the Avalon Hill Classic system, and apply that to a lot of things. I think this could be applied to a lot of different made-up worlds that kind of follow this color magic thing and get a lot out of it. But again, why? You know, why do you want to go through taxing your brain and trying to rewire it to cope with this game? Well, if you love that kind of puzzle, and if you really want to face something that I think is an intense shift in thinking, this might serve some purpose. But beyond the exercise or enjoyment of the exercise, I don't see anything that this provides. Thus, I rate it pretty low, simply because it's beyond me. And I don't think it has that kind of reach that, say, chess has. Chess is beyond me in a similar sort of way. It's not like I can't play chess. I think I could learn this or chess to play at a fairly competent level, but I just don't feel the desire to. But on the other hand, chess gets one little boost, which is obviously a lot of people do like that. You know, I'm willing to say, okay, it's got a certain aura or cloak of prestige about it. Sorcerer doesn't have that. I think it deserves it if people were to study it that hard, but I think it doesn't actually, you know, unless it achieved that, then I would give it that extra point up to chess level, to the 6. But right now, no. It's just too miserable an experience, and it doesn't have enough people who absolutely love it and have played it and have kind of proven that there is a strong competitive balance that can be achieved using the game. Of course, chess doesn't have a competitive balance. Chess is intrinsically unbalanced, and I would suspect this is more balanced than chess. It's just you play two games or a series of games of chess to see if somebody can break the other person's serve, as it were, or turn to be white. All right, let's send this one home.